where we are looking at habits that we can cultivate in our own lives that will do the inner person good. And so far we have looked at reading, breathing, and giving, and today I want to look at the topic of resting. Now, I don't think I need to convince you, particularly here in London, that rest is a precious commodity in 21st century life. But just to kick things off, here's a few statistics just to set the scene. In at number 1, 220. That is on average the amount of messages, calls, texts, emails the average office worker gets every single day. 1/3. The amount of managers in the UK that are currently suffering ill health because of overwork and stress. That goes up to almost 1 in 2, 43% when you get to senior managers. 105 million. That's the amount of sick days taken every single year simply because of stress. Not other sick days, just stressed sick days. Stress, by the way, is now the biggest cause of sickness in the UK right now. 40. The amount of times the average office worker checks their email every single hour. That's one check of your email every 1.5 minutes. 700 billion. Extraordinary number. The amount of hours spent on Facebook every single month. That, next slide, equates to 730,000 years of human existence just on Facebook every single month. That's incredible. Next slide. Studies vary on this. Around about 7.5 to 8, the amount of hours of sleep you need every single night. Now, I know when we talk about sleep, we always throw the Margaret Thatcher statistic out there that she could get by on 4 to 5 hours sleep, so many of us can as well. Not true. 95% of us need 7.5 to 8 hours sleep every single night. And of the remaining 5%, half of them, 2.5%, need more than 8 hours sleep every single night. Now, I suggest many of them are in this room by the sound of it. Now, just out of interest, if you got 8 hours sleep or more every single night over the last week, just put your hand up. Okay, the least popular people in the room right now. Okay, I rest my case, probably less than 20 people. And interestingly, if anyone here in the last year has gone 4 nights in a row on 5 hours of sleep or less, the following day you would have had the same cognitive capacity as somebody who was completely drunk. Would you ever advise going to work completely drunk? I think not. 5, this is an interesting one. 5 minutes, the length of the average attention span right now. Of course, most of you didn't hear that as you've zoned out of the talk already. In fact, the last words Jen Ellis said to me before I came on stage, "I've bought my book in case I get bored." Yeah. Thanks, Jen. Feel the love. Interestingly, one recent UCLA study said that just 5 hours of internet usage actually changes the way the brain works. And attention spans are now plummeting as a result. Next slide. 10 years ago, the average attention span was 12 minutes. It's already decreasing significantly. In a few years' time, if trajectories continue, our attention span will equate to that of a goldfish. That's what's happening to our brains right now. Next one, 7%. The amount of people who regularly forget their own birthdays because they're so overwhelmed with information coming at them. 6 minutes. 6 minutes on average, the amount of time that we can go before we have to check our mobile phones again to see if we've got any new friends. One interesting study took a group of students and they took mobile phones off students for 24 hours to see what happened. The top 3 symptoms were these. Symptom number 1, almost constant anxiety, fidgeting, and restlessness. Symptom number 2, regular phantom phone vibrations. Symptom number 3, reaching for a phone that wasn't actually there. And while you laugh, you sickos, you, those are all symptoms of recovering from an addiction. 77 minutes. The average length of the average Londoner's commute right now. 26 million. The amount of hours of overtime that are worked every single day. Tomorrow, another 26 million hours of overtime will be worked by UK employees. The vast majority of that overtime is completely unpaid. And £16.49, the amount that everybody in Christchurch would have to give to club together and buy me and the family a holiday to Barbados. Thought I'd throw that in there. And we know these stats are worse for Londoners than anybody else. One recent study by a leading newspaper said Londoners are more stressed and less satisfied with life than anybody else in the country. Tell you what, I think we need cheering up. Let's have a Lord of the Rings quote, shall we? This is what Bilbo Baggins says. I feel old, Gandalf, deep in my heart of hearts. Why? I feel all thin, sort of stretched, if you know what I mean. By the time I'm done in Christchurch, we'll have read Lord of the Rings together. I want you to know that. Like butter that has been scraped over too much bread, that can't be right. I need a change or something. I wonder if anyone here can relate to poor old Bilbo. You just need a change or something. Or maybe you can relate to what the Queen of Hearts says to Alice in Wonderland. My dear, here we must run as fast as we can just to stay in the same place. And if you wish to go anywhere, you must run twice as fast as that. We know, don't we? London's busy. Life is full. Time is scarce. So given all of that, how do we live life well? How do we rest well? What does the Bible have to say about rest? That is what this talk is all about. So if you've got a Bible, please turn to Genesis chapter 2. Because we're talking on a topic today rather than the passage, there'll be a couple of passages we allude to. Keep a finger in Exodus chapter 20 as well, if you can. Genesis 2 on the screen. I'm going to read the first 3 verses. Here we go. Thus the heavens and the earth were completed in all their vast array. By the 7th day, God had finished the work he had been doing. So on the 7th day, he rested from all his work. And God blessed the 7th day and made it holy, because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done. Now over to Exodus 20. This is the middle of the 10 commandments. This is commandment number 4. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son or daughter, nor your manservant or maidservant, nor your animals, nor the alien within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, but he rested on the 7th day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. So what's that all about? What does the Bible have to say about rest? Well, I don't know about you, but for me, whenever I reflect on the creation story in Genesis, I've always found the 7th day a little bit of an anticlimax. Days 1 to 6, you've got all this activity going on. Light, stars, planets, oceans, wildlife, animals. And then day 6, the culmination of creation itself. Life is breathed into humanity. And then we get to day 7. Nothing. Nada. Niente. Zip. Zilch. Zero. Diddly squat. Nil point. Nothing happens at all. And yet, to ancient readers, if there was ever a day they got excited about, if there was ever a day where they started dancing and clapping and cheering, it was the 7th day. Why did it make them so excited? Well, I'm going to draw particularly on a book called The Lost World of Genesis 1, written by a professor called John Walton. We're going to look at a short video clip from him in a moment. He's endorsed by a whole load of biblical scholars and commentators that we'd endorse here at Christchurch. And on top of them, the head of the Human Genome Project, Francis Collins, is a big fan of his work as well. What he's done is this. He has done deep research on the peoples that Genesis was written to. Babylonian, Mesopotamian, ancient Near East. And he's asked the question, how would they have understood the Genesis narrative? If we understand that, that will surely help us better understand what the writer intended originally. So we're now going to watch a 90-second clip of the significance of the 7th day, the rest day. So for the next 90 seconds, sit back, relax, and enjoy Professor John Walton.
One thing that we don't pick up at all when we read the text, but that any ancient reader, Israelite or otherwise, would have understood, is that if it talks about God resting, it's talking about a temple, because that's where God rests and where the gods rest, and that's why temples were built. And therefore, we automatically are thrown into a temple context when we understand the ancient world. The idea that they had in the ancient world was that the temple and the cosmos were kind of all blended into one. If we used a modern metaphor, it'd almost be like the temple was the Oval Office. It's kind of where all the business is done, where the work is run. It's the hub of activity and of control. And so for them, that's what the temple represented, and the cosmos was run from the temple. And when deity took up his rest in the temple, it wasn't for leisure or relaxation. It was to settle down to the work now that everything's set up and ready to go. When our candidates run for office and wanting to get into the White House, it's not so they can just flop down on the Lincoln bedroom. It's rather so they can get into the Oval Office and start running it. And if you ask, so what happened after the person was elected and inaugurated? Well, then they started running the country. And likewise, after the cosmos is organized and God takes up his rest in this cosmic temple, well, now he starts running it.
So what Professor John Walton is saying is this, goes into much more detail in the book. If you look through Genesis, there's a whole load of allusions to the temple. In fact, when the temple is actually created later on in the biblical narrative, there's a whole load of references to what is going on in Genesis. And when it talks about God resting in the temple, it's not about him slobbing out in a lazy boy drinking a pina colada. The analogy he uses is of a president coming into the Oval Office. Order has now been brought to the chaos, and he now sets about the task of ruling and reigning. His kingdom is now being established. It's not about a day off for God. God, I don't think, takes a day off. This is what Jesus says in John 5:17. My Father is always at his work to this very day, and I too am working. That's why the Sabbath is so significant. It's a way of showing that God is running the show. In fact, if you read Genesis, it gets very alliterative at times. We read there was evening and morning the first day, evening and morning the second day, evening and morning the third day. There is none of that at all on the seventh day. And all the ancient readers would have looked at that and thought, all the symmetry is broken. What is going on? It is because, metaphorically speaking, God sits on the throne, he begins ruling and reigning, and that rule and reign never, ever, ever ends. That's why it's so significant. And in the ancient world, when kings were inaugurated in the temple, just like Queen Elizabeth was coronated in Westminster Abbey, they went through a detailed inauguration ceremony. Anyone want to guess how long that ceremony was? It was 7 days. And on the seventh day, the king sat on the throne, crown on his head, scepter in his hand, and he began the process of ruling and reigning. That is why the Sabbath is so significant. And so on the seventh day, the Israelites stepped back from their work as a way of declaring that God is running the show, not us. You see, in the ancient world, to take a day off actually put a threat to your health. It put a threat to your livelihood. These were the days pre-refrigeration. You couldn't guarantee necessarily that you would get food if you took a day off. That's what made the Israelites so anxious in the wilderness. If we don't collect grain on the seventh day, how will we have enough to eat? Maybe we should collect more. No, God said, no, I will provide for you. In an agrarian society, if you don't work, it puts your whole livelihood at risk. And so when they took a day off, it was first and foremost a powerful faith statement that we are trusting that God is in charge of our health and our family and our finances and our careers and our future and our success. It is in his hands, not ours. A lot of people wonder, why is the Sabbath commandment in the 10 commandments? I mean, these are the 10 biggies. I get why don't murder and don't steal is in there. They're pretty important. I even understand the first 3. Put God first before everything else. Don't worship idols. Why the Sabbath commandment? Doesn't it make God seem like an ogre? You will rest or you will die? I mean, is God really like that? Here's why it's significant. Primarily, it was an issue of faith. It marked out followers of Yahweh that we are following the one true God rather than any other God. All the other nations had to keep on working, either to please the gods, or if they didn't believe in God, because they therefore believe that all my future, all my success, all my provision, it rests on my own efforts. For Israel, they took a step back. We're going to stop working because we trust that he is running the show, not us. On the screen behind me next is a picture of a guy called Gary Grant. You may have heard of him. He launched our Alpha course at Christchurch a few years ago. He's now a multi-millionaire, and the guy who came up with the Entertainer chain of toy stores that are now throughout the UK. First store was started in the early 1980s. In 1991, he became a Christian. Shortly afterwards, he made a decision, I will not open any of my stores on a Sunday. All of his competitors thought he was utterly mad. In fact, there was one interview he did outside one of his stores, which is right next to a Premiership football ground. And the interview took place on match day on Sunday. And all the other stores around were open. And the guy interviewing him was watching tens of thousands of would-be shoppers walk past his clothes store into all the other stores a few hours ahead of kickoff. And the guy asked him, "Isn't this foolish business sense? Aren't you losing potential custom? I mean, I get the Sunday thing, but maybe just at least on match days on Sundays you should open up. Surely that's the best thing to do." What Cary Grant said was this. He said, "You've got to understand, I believe in God, first of all. And once I've jumped over that hurdle, you've got to realize that I therefore also believe that my future, my finances, my success, whether this chain of toy stores stands or falls, it's ultimately in God's hands, not mine." And despite the seeming stupidity of that decision, put the next slide up, over the last 2 decades, despite the economic climate in which we live, the Entertainer has outlasted and outsold pretty much all of its rivals and competitors. There is a man who's taking a step back and who realizes my future is in his hands and not mine. The burden's on him, on God, rather than on Cary Grant. And if you allow me to be really honest with you for a moment, Christchurch, London, allow me to be blunt with you for a moment. If I had to suggest what is our biggest vulnerability as a church, and what is the biggest vulnerability to the many careers that are represented in this room right now, I think it might well be this. You're just so darn capable. I mean, I'm looking around this room right now. You need to know I think you're amazing. I listen to what you're studying, the jobs that you're doing, your great dreams for the future. I just think, wow. I look at how bright and sharp you are, how socially intelligent you are. I look at how eloquent you are on your feet, the leadership gifting that's quite clearly on so many of you. Just think you're amazing. The talent of the musicianship on stage, the way you are with other people. I just think what an amazing bunch of people. But let me also say this, that if the growth and fruitfulness and success of this church and all the careers represented within it simply rests on the talents of the people within it, may God have mercy. May God help us. This church's health and growth and fruitfulness will not and never rest on eloquent public speaking, on slick Sunday meetings, on great leaders that emerge and accelerate through our ranks, on clever programs and initiatives. The Bible is very clear. We are at best like farmers who sow seed and then wait for God to bring growth. For thousands and thousands of years, up until today, even with all of our modern technology, farmers sow seeds, they plow fields, they scatter crops, but then at the end of the day, even if only metaphorically speaking, they have to get on their knees and pray for rain. They have to acknowledge that if I'm going to get a harvest, it rests on something or someone beyond my control. I can't control the weather. I can't control the miracle of life within the seed itself. That is the power of Sabbath. That we take a step back and say, yeah, he's running the show, not me. You know, if anyone ever comes to my little boy Brody, who almost ran on stage in the middle of worship, and said, how are you going to cope with the mortgage? He would say, my dad will take care of that. That's how we should live as followers of Jesus. What's our future? What's our career? What job am I going to get after university? My dad will take care of that. That is the power of Sabbath. And we stop working to acknowledge that he keeps working. But there is one other reason that we Sabbath as well. That's not the only reason that we Sabbath. If you read the Old Testament Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, the 10 Commandments are actually listed twice. In Exodus, which we read, chapter 20, but also in Deuteronomy 5 as well. And in Deuteronomy 5, the 4th commandment, the Sabbath commandment, is actually slightly different. Let's read it together. Deuteronomy chapter 5, and the words will be on the screen behind me. There we go. See if you can spot what's added. Verse 12, observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy, as the Lord your God has commanded you. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you nor your son or daughter, nor your manservant or maidservant, nor your ox, your donkey, or any of your animals, nor the alien within your gates, so that your manservant and maidservant may rest as you do. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and that the Lord your God brought you out of there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore the Lord your God has commanded you to observe the Sabbath day. Did anybody spot what was added? Anybody spot what was extra? Anyone? What was extra? Sorry, what? Egypt. Observe the Sabbath day because you're to remember what happened in Egypt. Why? Why is that significant? Here's the point I think that the writer is making. You are to observe the Sabbath day because you are to look back to that 400-year period in your story, in your journey, in your history, where you never had a holiday, you never had a day off, you never had a break. What were you then? You were slaves. And therefore you take a day off to declare to anybody who's watching, I'm not a slave anymore. I am free. I love this quote by C.S. Lewis. He puts it like this: men tell not only their wives, but also themselves that it is a hardship to stay late at the office or the school on some bit of important extra work, but it is not quite true. It is a terrible bore, of course, when old Fatty Smithson draws you aside and whispers, look, here, we've got to get you in on this important meeting or deadline somehow. A terrible bore. But how much more terrible if you were left out? It is tiring and unhealthy to lose your Saturday afternoons, but to have them free because you don't matter, that is much worse. Do you get what C.S. Lewis is saying? He's asking the question, what is it that makes you work and work and work and work? Here's the question, has something enslaved your heart? Do you need the money? Do you need the glittering CV? Do you need the achievement relative to your peers? One of the reasons I wonder if people can't switch off from social media is because do we think our image depends on updating our Facebook status? I want people to think I'm better than I really am. I wonder if anybody has come into church today and you've lifted your hands at all the right times, sung all the songs, said amen in all the right places, you look happy and smiley, but deep inside your soul you know there's brokenness there. But you can't let anybody know. So I've got to wearily keep up an image. And I'll keep on working, and I'll keep on working, and I won't switch off because I don't want anyone to see what's going on inside. Have you become a slave to identity, if not your Monday to Friday job? Let me ask you a question. Are you free? Or are you a slave? Before I worked for Christchurch, I worked for the BBC. Bit of TV, mainly radio, producing, presenting, interviewing celebrities, commentating on football matches, reporting on sports events, reading the news, all that jazz. And as you can imagine, even if you've not worked in the industry, it can be pretty toxic for your ego. You find out very quickly where you fit in the scheme of things. Who gets given the prime time slots? Who gets given the graveyard slots? Who gets to interview the great celebrities? Who the not so great celebrities? You hear how many thousands of people tune into your show as opposed to other people. You see people promoted ahead of you. There's lots of rivalry going on. And very early on in my career, I decided I am not going to work on Sundays. Now, just to say as an aside here, I do not think that the day in which you Sabbath is particularly significant. I think it's the principle that matters. You can Sabbath on any day. I chose Sundays because it meant I could also come to church and meet with other followers of Jesus and declare that he's running the show, not me. But it's actually the principle that matters, not the day. So I went to both my bosses. If you're on shift work, you may not have this luxury. I plucked up the courage, asked my bosses. They said, yes, we'll keep Sundays free for you. That's totally fine. Now, that may seem like an easy decision. Let me assure you it was not. Because for a decade of my life, I got offered some amazing gigs to report on. Cup finals, promotion and relegation deciders, who's going to win the title this year, the culmination of great sporting events. I think of one golfing tournament in particular I really wanted to do. Culminated on a Sunday, I said, no, I'm not gonna do that. Not only that, I watched people come into the industry and work their socks off and accelerate way past me and get more money and more prestige, and more profile and more respect. Now, all those requests activated everything inside me that you can imagine. Ego, pride, prestige, financial remuneration, everything was going on in here. But I also realized this, that when the people of Israel got delivered from slavery in Egypt, it was not simply about God working amazing miracles and overcoming the Egyptian army. That was most of it, sure, but it wasn't all of it. Because on top of all of that, the Israelites had to get up off their backsides, they had to walk out of Egypt, they had to walk through a desert land, they had to walk through a sea with a wall of water on their right and on their left, all the while with an enemy army pursuing them. And as I decided to take a Sabbath every week, it literally felt like I was walking through a barren land at times with the enemy armies of pride and prestige and a glittering CV and being better than my peers and financial remuneration chasing me all the way. It was not necessarily easy. But as I decided to take Sabbath, the strangest thing happened in my heart. I got free. I began to notice in really subtle ways. When somebody got promoted ahead of me, I could be genuinely happy for them rather than resent them inside. When somebody offered me a really great gig to report on, I seemed to respond with a little less pride than I used to. When someone gave me something really insignificant to do, I responded with a little less insecurity than I used to. When people met in corridors to snipe about who'd failed in this area, who'd done badly in this area, I managed to just extricate myself from that. I got free. Became much more secure. Didn't have to get my value from how I'm doing in my career. I got my value from him. Something changed in my heart. I got free. Let me ask you the question again. Are you free? Are you free? I want to show you another video clip. It's a bit of a weird one. It's actually a 2-minute viral advertisement that millions of people around the world have watched, but it's in Spanish. So you won't understand all the words. You won't understand the conversation that goes on. That doesn't matter necessarily. You'll get the point that I want to make, the cheesy Christian conclusion, after you've watched the video and I explain it. All you need to know before you watch it is this. A leading brand has placed a cash machine in high streets and shopping centres in Spain, and it is offering people 100 euros completely free of charge. But it comes with a catch. If you choose to take it, you have to spend it on somebody else. So the first half of the advert is people finding the deal. The second half is what they did with the money. For the next 2.5 minutes, sit back, relax, and enjoy the advert.
Lanza un montón de balones a una cancha.
Muchas gracias.
Lo que me gusta, mira.
Las 2 entradas, vamos a regalárselas.
Gracias.
Here's the cheesy Christian point I want to make. When you get money that is not your own to spend on someone else, doesn't it make you freer with the money? Doesn't it give you more joy? Doesn't it give you more creativity? What can I use the money for to bless other people? Doesn't it free you from self-obsession and self-absorption and how to build my own mini-kingdom? Doesn't it come with a new sense of life and vitality? Isn't it better that way? Here's the point. Here's the point. It's a motif that's used both in the Old and the New Testament. It is this: we are not our own. If we are followers of Jesus, we have been bought with a price. We are now his possession. We have been redeemed, ransomed from slavery. And when we truly understand that, rather than feeling like, oh, I've now got to do all that Jesus tells me to do because I'm now his possession, when we realize we are not our own, when we truly understand that, it means then we can say, oh, I don't need to worry about my future. All anxiety can be lifted. I can now spend myself on behalf of the needy. I can give to those who need more than me. I can focus on others before I focus on myself. It comes with a new sense of joy. It comes with a new sense of life and vitality. I'm no longer obsessed with my own mini kingdom. I can focus on other people instead. That's the way it's meant to be because God has set us free. That is the power of Sabbath. That I take a day out next week as a way of declaring, you know what? My life is not about myself and my own mini kingdom. I am now his. And I've been liberated from all the things that can ensnare my heart as a result. Are you free? Or are you wearily trying to keep up an image of other people thinking, oh, they're fine, nothing's wrong with them, when there's brokenness in here that needs dealing with? Are you trying to work and work and work because you're obsessed with getting your value from stuff rather than him? Are you really free? And so the point of Sabbath, as Eugene Peterson puts it, is twofold. It is for praying and it's for playing. Rather than carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders like Atlas, thinking my future rests on me. No, he's running the show, not me. And I can play as a way of saying that I am not a slave anymore. So if that is the point of Sabbath, how do we do it? 3 things, really practically, just to really earth this, and then we're done. First practical point is this. Take time out for sheer inactivity. Sheer inactivity. When I first moved to London, one of my first enduring memories was the moment I got to Bond Street Station. I was approaching the bottom of the escalator, and this guy in a suit barged past me, sprinted onto the platform as the doors went beep, 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 beep. They closed. He missed the train. He slammed his satchel on the floor. He kicked the air in frustration. And 30 seconds later, I glided onto the platform behind him, a little bit like Jesus. And I looked up at the clock. It was only 2 minutes till the next train. And I looked down at this guy through my nostrils, and I thought, loser. Within 6 months, I became that man. The dawning realization, I'd been to this event, number of people there, and I was walking to my car. And my car was about 3/4 of a mile away. Walking to my car, and about 10 feet to my left, a little in front of me, is this athletic blonde guy who's obviously walking to his car as well. We're both walking to our cars. This thought comes into my head, I don't know where from. You can beat him. You can beat him to the car. I thought, yeah, I can beat him. So I just upped my pace a little faster. Within a few paces, I was in the lead. I was beating the athletic blonde guy. On the outside, I'm just walking to my car. On the inside, yeah, I'm a winner. Well, a few paces later, I looked out the corner of my eye. The blonde guy has caught me up. He's now taken the lead. I think I'm not having any of that, so I upped my pace a little bit more. He obviously sees me take the lead, about half a mile to go now, and now he ups his pace as well. Within no time, we're both walking like we've got something wedged up our trousers at this point in time. At this point in time, I think I'm playing for pride here. I just took off. I got bags of equipment on my shoulders. I'm not going to lose this one. Well, this blonde guy, never met him before, he starts running too. There's now 2 strangers running a race that doesn't even exist. Just like to point out, I beat that punk. I thrashed him. Yeah, winner. He was called Ed. He worked for Sky. Wah, 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 wah. I got into my car and thought, what is wrong with me? Happened to me last week. I was in Morrison's, got my bag of stuff. I got to the checkout. I couldn't help it. I started doing all these complex algorithms in my head. I thought, how many people are in each queue? How many things in their basket? Add all that up, divide that by the age and competency of the person at the checkout. And then, as I picked my queue, I put a marker in every other queue with which I would measure myself. And if I was quicker, I was like, yeah, I'm a winner. If not, I tell you what, I gave the checkout lady such a glare that 2 rows beat me. She said to me, hello, sir, how are you today? Well, I've been better, actually. I said, no, I didn't. Oh, what? There's one comedian I heard talking to a London audience. He said, I'm struck by Londoners' obsession with time. He said, credit to you. Whenever you get terrorist threats, you're at your offices across the capital thinking, what? There's a bomb on the Piccadilly line? Well, if I take the Jubilee line, change at Green Park, that might be quicker actually. Yeah, great. If you can relate to any of that, you need help. Take time for sheer inactivity. Pick the longest queue in the supermarket. Pick the longest traffic traffic lane on the motorway. Stand on the escalator at the tube station. Don't even walk. Get off two tube stations early before you get home and walk and get home 10 minutes later. Take time for sheer inactivity. In the Old Testament, every 7 years, they would let the land lie fallow. Creation itself would get to rest. But of course, when the land lies fallow, it's not that nothing happens. What's in the soil sprouts to the surface. In the same way, we need to let our souls lie fallow so what's inside can bubble to the surface and we can deal with it appropriately. I have lost count of the amount of people that think that busyness will take away the pain that's going on inside. Busyness will not bring you the healing that you hope it will. You need to take time for inactivity so you can deal with your soul. Number 2, find out what replenishes you. One of the wonders of creation is that we are all different. Great variety, and so we respond in different ways. In fact, one of the premises behind this whole series is that we are more than a physical being. We are a soul. And though there's mystery around what exactly the soul is, we all know there's something about us that's more than simply a mind, body, and emotions. We'd never sing the great hymn, then sings myself, my Saviour God to thee. Or Jesus, lover of myself. The word soul itself implies our personhood is deeper than that. How's your soul doing? Hebrews 13:17, part of my responsibility as a leader in this church is to keep watch over your souls. How's your soul doing? And because we're made up like that, slobbing out in front of the TV is not necessarily the way that will bring replenishment. In fact, sometimes I think that TV and social media can keep our minds busy so we don't have to deal with what's really going on inside. So find out what brings you energy. We've recommended this book a number of times, Gary Thomas's Sacred Pathways, different ways that we respond to God. Some people it's in the wonder of creation. Others, it's solitude and contemplation. Others, celebration. So for some people, it's worship or stimulating your mind. Find out what replenishes you and do that. Go to a museum. Smell some roses. Eat some cheese. Do a little dance when no one's watching. Whatever it is for you. Find out what replenishes you and then do that. And the third bit of advice is this. Ruthlessly plan rest into your schedule. I don't know whether you've seen this illustration. Next slide on the screen. It's called putting the big bricks in the bucket first. There's the same amount of stuff in each of those jars. One, it fits snugly. The other, it's just bulging out of the top. And the analogy is this. You want to fit everything in your life, put the big stuff in first, then the medium stuff, then the little stuff, and it all trickles down the side of the big stuff. You can then fit it all in. So in your life, there's some big important stuff like going to work, seeing family and relatives, that's important. Prayer and reading the Bible, that's a big one. Put that in first. Then there's medium stuff. Gotta eat, do your weekly shop, pay the bills, do that next. And then put the little stuff in last. Getting a haircut, buying Christmas presents, whatever it might be. I've got one problem with this illustration. Who wants to live a life that's that full? We've got to make a decision beforehand to say, you know what, I'm going to create space in my life. I was made for more than simply activity. Great author, preacher, teacher called Rick Warren talks about diverting daily, withdrawing weekly, and abandoning annually. To be able to do that, you've got to lead your diary. You've got to really nail that. I want to encourage you to do that. I want to say a couple of other things. Firstly, some people might be listening to this talk and thinking, you know, for me, Andy, you don't get where I'm at right now. Rest for me is hard to come by. You don't get the pressures I live with at work. You don't get how horrible my boss is. Let me say this, I know how you feel. I can wait all day, that's a funny joke. I want to say this. Appraisal's months away, you'll have forgotten about it by then. I also want to say this, that one of the products of the fall in Genesis was that work became painful toil. And we will only be fully and finally liberated from that when Jesus comes back or when we leave this life. And Hebrews describes that as entering into his rest. That's where we get the phrase, rest in peace. And if rest is hard to come by for you right now, you need to know there is hope for you. There is a Sabbath rest that is coming for followers of Jesus that will be better than any earthly rest. There is still hope for you. Maybe the band want to come up and I finish with this illustration. It's from the musical called The Man of La Mancha. You may have heard about it before. Stories of a woman in the sex industry, a prostitute. And she just sees herself as a commodity, a product. Sees no value, she's controlled by other people. And early on in the story, a medieval knight meets her and falls madly in love with her. He sees something different in her. He sees her value. He sees her dignity. He begins to call it out of her. First, she responds defensively. No, I feel a bit uncomfortable with all that love. But after deposit after deposit after deposit of unconditional love, she slowly starts to change. He gives her a new name called Dulcinea. It's beautiful. As the musical goes on, she then begins to return to her former way of life. She gets enslaved again, much to the delight of all the people that are controlling her. And at the end of the musical, the medieval knight calls her to his deathbed, and he starts singing over her, "Never forget the impossible dream. Never forget my love for you, my Dulcinea, my beautiful Dulcinea. Never forget who I've called you to be. Never forget who I see in you. There's more to you than that slavery life you are living." It's a wonderful story of the gospel. You know, I'm struck when I look at the creation story. Humanity is created on the 6th day. The Jewish day started in the evening and morning the first day, evening and morning the second day. So the first thing that Adam and Eve do, the very first thing they do is they sleep. And then they enjoy a day of God resting, God ruling and reigning, God taking all the burdens and responsibility. My dad's taking care of that. Before any work that we do, before anything that we go on to accomplish, we were made for more than that. First and foremost, we were made for relationship with him. And the power of the Sabbath is that we take a day out to remember I'm not a slave anymore. So often we go off to our working weeks and get enslaved again by everything that we rub up against. And then we Sabbath and hear God singing over us, "Never forget who I've called you to be. Never forget the new name that I've given you. You're saved, you're chosen, you're accepted, you're my son, you're my daughter. Never forget the impossible dream." That's the power of Sabbath, praying and playing. He takes all the burdens off our backs and he has made us free. Why don't we all stand?